go to. All right, here we go.
Sounds
Go
good.
live. How are we doing? Now this is where the crowd. This is where the crowd goes wild.
Mild.
Yeah.
So what would the
Oh fuck! Yeah.
so what would the first track be if you were going into a gig right now? What would you be firing into right now?
Oh my God! What,
Jesus.
Roots Radix? What do you say?
Probably, yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
A cover, of course. Who would want one of our songs?
So how you doing,
Good
lads?
stuff in it.
So welcome. This is the celebration of Go For It. 40 years tomorrow. It was released. 40 years to go tomorrow.
Never.
And we have Jake and Ali here joining us, and I hope everybody's tuning in. We can have a bit of a chat about the album and about the sort of circumstances around that time and where you were and everything. So first of all, how have you been? How are you getting on, Ali?
Yeah, good.
How have I getting on? Well, the lockdown beard speaks volumes, I think, of like, why the fuck should I bother shaving anymore whenever we're outside of the public eye? I actually feel quite nervous about this because I haven't been in the public eye for a long time, apart from, being accosted by COVID support officers who are like concerned for my well-being now and again because I'm not wearing a mask or anything like that. And it's I hate to mention, sort of like local situations that we find ourselves in, but of course it's affected everybody worldwide, so why not?
Yeah, you're over in the east of England now, aren't you?
Yes, for my sins. But I'll keep the local football situation out of this because we all want to have a great time here and not have any animosity.
Norwich being top of the league at the moment, so
yeah, at least 10 points ahead, I think, was the latest, or something like that.
well, I'm sitting here in Watford, so my kids are Watford fans. We'll say the least about that. So
we're not too far behind.
We're on your heels, yeah. Anyway, Jake, how you doing? How's things for you?
Yeah, not bad. I mean, I don't have to concern myself with second division football just yet, so I'm okay.
Second division, that's an ancient term,
Yeah, well, we're talking about a 40-year-old album. I think we're pretty ancient suits.
That's out.
So, have you been recently, Jake?
I'm good. Yeah, I'm good. I'm still at home. We had my second vaccination yesterday, so it should be. It's one step closer to actually getting back on the stage since we were talking about playing again.
Yeah.
Hopefully, like I said, we're all getting a bit closer to that.
You're looking remarkably well for having been jabbed in the arm.
Yeah, well, it wasn't that difficult,
There could have been worse places to be jabbed in. That's for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Norwich for starters. Anyway,
we'll see about that.
So Go For It is 40 years old tomorrow. It was released as Stiff Little Fingers' third album. So set the stage for us to the planning, the songwriting, the recording. By 1980, you had all moved from Belfast to London. Is that right?
Yeah, I think 79. We were there.
Yeah.
And it was a huge move. At the time, London was massive compared to Belfast. It was a very small city, and even though we're going out of almost like a war situation with the conflict going on there, we found London with all the trials and tribulations and problems there, a lot to deal with. On top of that, we were trying to make a living, signed off the dole, etc., all living together, four of us in one room in a crappy wee hotel. I say hotel, it was a damp B&B in Notting Hill Gate, and the fact that we got through that period speaks volumes, about the band, I think. People would see, the band's moved to London, that's great, that's fantastic, but it was actually difficult, to say the least. But, you get through that because being out of Belfast was, I guess, a major achievement in itself.
It sort of feel like if it had been sort of these times, a band away from home living that sounds like, with the amount of camera phone stuff around, you could have actually made a little YouTube series out of that probably, You guys, that would have been a sitcom and a half. That
would have been the end of it. People can actually see that going, oh my God, that bunch of...
Yeah, it wasn't like the Monkees or anything, seriously, Ali said it was a bit rough, and it took a bit of getting used to. But we didn't have a record deal, we didn't have any backing financially, and so we were pretty much living on £1 a day. And that sounds crazy, but and I remember this really, really vividly. I remember we were walking through Hyde Park one day, just basically to put the time in because we'd nothing to do during the day. And none of us had eaten for, I think, a day or so. And we noticed that Brian was hanging back behind us. And he had a Mars bar, which he was trying to eat sneakily without sharing it with the rest of us. I made a Mars bar. We came within inches of beating him up. It's crazy.
It sounds like a cliche, but starving for your art. But we did actually go hungry. And I remember berating management for some money. Eventually I tracked Gordon down and got 10 quid off him. I went, oh great, and went straight down the pub and bought 3 pints with it. Which wasn't very responsible, but you have to remember we were only like 18 or 19.
Yeah, we were kids.
Absolutely. The necessities for a young band at that time, I'd say. So the band lineup was yourselves, Henry Clooney and Jim Riley. And what was the sort of the mood in the band around that sort of time, and what was it like being in London and that kind of stuff? What was it kind of, we've
been in London whenever Go For It came around. Would been in London for some time. I mean, it was 79, 80. It was only 2 years, but it feels like, looking back, it feels like a lifetime. You know, it was a very formative experience. We had been used to living in London, been used to living together, even though it was still quite, you know, traumatic for supposed adults thrown together, like, almost like living together on top of each other. And we kind of got through that and just knuckled down to the business of making music and trying to convince ourselves that we now were actually a professional outfit, whatever that means.
Yeah, I mean, I think by the time we got around to Go For It, I mean, the first album's very much, it's your live set, you know. So it's and when the songs were written for that, they weren't actually written for an album. They were just, you know, we were just writing songs. With Nobody's Heroes, obviously we'd signed the record deal, and it was very much, well, if you could do more of the same lads, and a hit single would be great if you could manage that, which amazingly we did. But Go For It, I remember it was a definite sea change in the way we approached it. You know, the first two albums were very much, here's a song, play it through on a guitar, learn it, we'll go out and just play it as it's, you know, initially seen. By the time we got to Go For It, we were spending more time actually trying to develop the sound of different songs. We were expanding because we could all play better. And as Ali said, you know, we bonded together very quickly as a band. We got a lot better very quickly. And I think we all wanted to stretch our wings a bit. You know, there was a lot more time spent in a rehearsal room before Go For It than there was before either of the other two records.
We have some questions that some fans have sent in ahead of time. So I'm going to go to one of those right now. So Sam Gordon asks, all tracks are listed as a Fingers and Ogilvy, Fingers/Ogilvy. Was this done just for publishing, or were the tracks actually collaborative?
No, they were, in the main, they're either written by myself on my own, or myself and Gordon, or Henry and Gordon. Yeah, basically it was the idea behind it was I'd seen so many bands put substandard songs on records simply because by the time the money starts coming in, those that didn't write were like, well, I want to have a song on the album because I want an extra, you know, a share of the money. And so it was very much just a quality control thing. It was a case of, well, if we all split the money equally, then basically the consideration of what goes on the record comes down to what's a good song, rather than, you know, it takes that argument out of the equation. And also the way, I mean, considering I was obviously the main songwriter, Gordon, my thinking also behind it was, you know, that, okay, I might be sitting in a bedroom with an acoustic guitar or whatever, writing these songs, but the actual finished thing doesn't sound like, you know, what I've written. I mean, it only sounds like that because Ali put the bass part on, or Jim, you know, come up with a drum pattern or whatever. So as far as I was concerned, it was not just making sure that we didn't put substandard songs on. It was also, you know, the record wouldn't have sounded like that without you guys. So
yeah, I mean, in terms of the collaboration, the term collaborators, it sounds vaguely insidious, you know, like we're up to something. But everybody contributed to the arrangements, which I think was very important. Like the perfect example was the cover, the Bunny Wailer cover on the album, you know, Roots Radix, which we initially started pretty much true to the original form, and it wasn't working out. It was dragging on, and then Henry, to his credit, kind of went, oh, screw this, and started playing it double time, just on that 2-chord guitar riff. Everybody jumped in, guitar, bass, drums, and it gelled just like that. And that was one moment I particularly remember in, I think it was Jam. No, before we got to Jam, it was.
Well, it was Lots Road, yeah. It was Lots Road,
yeah. Where the photograph was taken outside the studio that graced the inner sleeve of Go For It. I think I don't actually have that.
Yeah. I mean, Henry just suddenly decided. You're right. I mean, he suddenly decided, let's do it like Eddie and the Hot Rods, and off he went. You know, it was like that
fast.
Let's do that. Yeah, it was fast.
Yeah, it worked out well.
So you start to cover some of this ground. That's kind of why I cut you off, Jake, earlier on, because there's a couple of questions about the kind of the inspiration and the direction of the album. So we've got two questions which I'll give you at the same time, just so that we got.
Okay.
So JP Hamill asks, did this album mark an intentional change in direction, considering the previous album had less instruments in the production? Was this added during or after initial studio recordings, as it gives the album a more polished sound? Was that kind of the reason behind it? Andy Carter asks, hi Jake and Ali, I've seen you for the second time on the Go For It tour at the Capitol Aberdeen and still got my signed programme. For the third album, did you feel much pressure to change, to try and change your sound or to move away from the punk sound, or was it a natural progression?
Well, there was never...
I think it was...
Oh, go ahead, yeah.
No, I was just going to say, I think it was fairly natural, because like I said, we'd done here's a song, let's learn it, let's go out and tour. And I think, like I said, confidence was a huge thing. I think we were a lot more confident in ourselves as players and in ourselves as a band. And that led to us wanting to stretch things out. Also, I think, speaking personally, I wanted, when we approached this, I remember having the conversation with Gordon that we wanted to make it like what was an old-fashioned album, like a Frank Sinatra record, but it looked like a photograph album. So it was like, 10, 12-inch, 78s, whatever. And so the idea was that every song could possibly be a single. And that was in and of itself was going to lead to a certain amount of diversity. And yeah, like Ali said, the amount of arrangement that went on just led naturally to what, instead of just making this a 1, 2, 3, 4 punk rock song, what about if we just start with, say, bass guitar and then start bringing in instruments so it builds up and eventually becomes that? Or how about we play it in a different style? Or maybe, and God forbid, I remember when we came up with the idea of, what would work on this? A brass section. God, you could hear a pinball. It was like, hang on a minute. because, it was like tantamount to, that was punk bands don't use brass sections. What are you talking about? It's crazy. So, I mean, there were things like that. And, let's put a piano on it. We all looked blankly at each other. Can anybody play the piano?
Piano? What's that?
There was an amount of marking on the piano went on, like, hit that.
I mean, Ronan, you mentioned us being subject to pressure, but looking back, we were very fortunate in that there was actually very little pressure from the record company, as I remember it. Chrysalis, for such a major label, at that point had no input really, as I recall, at all. They basically said, "All right, lads, just get on with it." The only pressure came from our own expectations and what we think, people would want from us. To be honest.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we put the pressure on ourselves, and I mean that was. I think, I can't stress enough just how strong the whole thing felt. It's interesting, and it only struck me when we thought about, we talked about doing this little look back on the record. And I've often said that Go For It's my favourite of the first batch of albums that we made. And looking at it, it's actually the one that I had the least input on. In terms of songwriting and stuff, I don't think I actually wrote one word on the record. I come up with the occasional idea and stuff, and because Gordon and I were sharing an apartment at the time, so it was very much, I've got an idea for a song. That could be 2 o'clock in the afternoon, 2 o'clock in the morning. We'd disappear off into this little black box bedroom and write the song, no matter what time of day it was. So it was almost generic the way it worked. It was like either he or I had the idea, and I would sort of start writing music against what he was writing, or just inspired by the idea behind the song. So it was very, very much a band effort. And I think that's one of the reasons I really like it.
You were saying that just for the first time in years. I found myself going back to the lyrics on the album, which I dragged out, and on the back cover, there's all the friggin' lyrics. You bother to decipher them. And I was looking and I thought, God, how the hell did Jake manage to fit all these into such catchy tunes? And there was, I think there was real magic going on there. The second album, Nobody's Heroes, second studio album, it had moments of brilliance, but it was kind of patchy, and we're at that stage where, like, okay, you've done the first album, which is like 20 years worth of experience. What do you do now? And then we got to that, and that did feel a lot more. It felt more natural because I felt that Jake, you'd fallen into a way of writing that was very comfortable, and the band followed suit. And I think, after 40 years or so, or God, how many years, people have realised that, and I was surprised how, just looking at the questions and so on, that people had sent in advance, how much they actually rated this album, and it was, very rewarding.
Yeah, and again, you'll remember at the time, because this cracked me up whenever we put the second record out, and you do the tour and you meet the audience, and they're like, sort of, well, it's okay, it's not as good as the first one. And
you always say that.
and then you put the third one out, and it's like, it's not as good as the second one. You're like, you didn't like the fucking second one 2 years ago.
Well, it's like now. It's like the last studio album that came out. People are going, "Oh, it's like Sellout." Is this? No, it's like the rave songs of the set.
Yes, exactly.
It's the passing of
time. It takes time
time
for people to get used. Yeah, people get used to things.
Well, there's been a lot of questions about the album artwork. So, because it's an amazing piece of artwork, and I'm just going to see if I can just share it here. So we've got, we have some questions here, which I can get this thing to work. But anyway, the questions we have is from Roy Sloan. Go For It is my favourite album cover. I love it so much that I had it tattooed on my arm. My question is, who designed the cover, and how much say does the band have with album covers? Hanks, Roy Sloan.
Yeah, well, it was designed basically mainly between Gordon and a guy called John Sims, who worked in the art department at Chrysalis, and they came up with the concept between them. Originally, Gordon and for years he had it under his bed in our apartment. He wanted the cover to be just a really tight close-up of the face of Dennis the Menace from the Beano. With like a catapult.
I thought that was a great idea.
Yeah, if you want to get sued by the Beano, it's a brilliant idea. Yeah, so who's got more money here, DC Thompson's or us? It's like, yeah, fuck that. So the Beano cover went under his bed. But yeah, it's a very striking cover, and there's a lot of detail in it. And for anybody that keeps asking, no, the kid is climbing up. He's not falling off the fucking building. It's like, it kind of goes against the title. Go for it. Yeah, fuck off. Fuck off.
A question from Sten Savage asking, who's the child on the front cover? Like, do you know?
Oh, no, it's Ali. We tell everybody it was Ali.
Any child on a record cover, it's me.
Yeah, it's him.
I think this. We've had a lot of people saying that they had it tattooed on their arm, or so we've got. It says so. Jan Julica. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. I had a tattooed on my arm 30 years ago. I'd love to know the reasoning and think behind this beautiful cover art. So we've just covered that it's John Teflon Sims. And Ox Malloy asks, Go For It has always been my favourite album cover. It was the same artist who did Dance Craze and the two-tone ones. Says, funny growing up, my brother had a huge Dance Craze one on his wall, and I obviously had SLF, Skids, Pistols, etc. of mine. Who picked the finished cover design, and whether other potential ones designed? So you had that Dennis the Menace one was lined up. But so who sort of chose? You said, did you cover that? Who chose it? Was it, and did you all get? Generally, is it a collaborative process choosing album artwork? It's a hard thing, isn't it?
It was a collaborative thing. Yeah, we all went in as it was going along, and saw it as it was coming together. But eventually it gets to a point where you're like, okay, I don't really need to look at any more pictures. Can somebody else just fucking pick? And then you get into well, we're going to do individual portraits of the band, and that's when everybody starts going, well, you can't use that one because I look like shit in that. And it's like suddenly everybody becomes very vain when it's a photograph on an album cover.
That reminds me that it was the only pressure I would say that the record label ever put on us. And there's the tattoo.
The tattoo. Yeah, This is actually this is Roy Sloan. That's his arm there. We got a few through like that, but this one's the sort of the clearest and the largest one that I could find.
I'm moaning about one little job yesterday.
Yeah. And this is someone else had it on their scooter. Looks well there, doesn't it? It looks good.
Does look good.
Yeah.
Nice one.
And so so it was the same. He did all the two-tone ones as well.
Yeah, he was, like I said, he was the in-house art guy. I mean, they had a full art department. So, again, looking back on it, you really, when you signed to a record label then, it was like being a kid in a candy shop. You had access to all this incredible talent that worked there as well,
Well, that was the thing. I mean, labels at the time were kind of, you had A&R men with opinions and talent in what they were signing, what they were developing. And it's one of the biggest. I mean, I do this Need to Know Music show on Switchbox here, and I speak to musicians all the time, and it comes up time and time again. That's really missing for today's musicians and today's bands. That companies would develop artists and really help them, and all the people involved with the company knew what they were doing, and was that? Did you find that was a real massive support for you guys? By the time you got to this point where you were ready to spread your wings, was it good to have people, the record company, to kind of support you through that?
I think generally speaking, that they were supportive. The only pressure I think that I recall they ever put on us was trying to get all the band's photographs on the front cover, not realizing the individual politics that would possibly result in. So the eventual compromise wasn't until the next studio album after that, whenever it sort of featured photographs of the band. But in terms of support, I seem to remember Chrysalis being, for a band that had the history of being more to do with Jethro Tull and Bedlam and bands like that, or mainstream bands like Blondie. I seem to remember them being very much in tune with what we were doing.
That's good.
Yeah, there was a lot of support there. There was a lot of support there. There was a lot of advice. I mean, we were free to take it or ignore it as we wanted to, which again is a help in itself. It's like, because then you could weigh up your options, and that was very much what it was. It was very much a collaborative thing with Chrysalis. They were really very good with us.
And what were they like when you came and said, we want to do this cover of a reggae song, completely different? So this is we got a few questions about roots, radicals, rockers, and reggae. So I'm just going to play a little bit of this now because it's. Here we go. I mean, when you got that one finished, did you know it was the opener of the album?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think just basically that initial crash chord after Henry's opening, that kind of, where else are you going to put it on the record? You know what I mean? But yeah, it's like, take this really sort of beautiful, heartfelt sort of Jamaican ballad and kick the shit out of it.
Yes.
Well, this is the. Deck Byrne asked Roots Radicals, much like Johnny was from Inflammable Material, cover versions. However, when you compare to the originals from Bunny and Bob Marley's versions, these are uniquely SLF and a million miles from the originals to be considered covers. Was that intentional, and how did the band make the songs their own? So, what was the process you took?
I wouldn't say it was intentional in the fact that we sat down and thought, oh, how can we make this different or whatever. To be honest, it was a very natural, organic occurrence. We just played it the way that we heard things, the way that we played together. Whenever I listen back to the album now, which I I played a few songs on it that I hadn't played in ages. Every so often I'll go, oh, that's wrong, that's a wrong note, or that's a wrong chord, or whatever. It's like, and whenever you're playing them live, 40 years on, you think, do I recreate the mistakes, or do I play it like the way it's supposed to be?
Right.
So yeah, yes,
right.
do the mistakes, and
then say it was deliberate.
Of course. It was very, it just was very natural. We didn't know any other way of doing it. There was nothing sort of organized about it. If we had tried to organize anything, we probably would have thought, oh, that's too difficult, and would have given up. So whose idea was it to do the track? That's a good
It was
question.
originally my idea to do the song, because it had always been one of my favourites. But like again, as Ali said, when I brought it to the band, we did exactly what we'd done with all the previous albums, which was like, I'd bring in a song, or Henry would bring in a song, whoever, and you'd play it on a guitar, and everybody else would just join in. But with this, obviously, I just brought in like a cassette of the Bonnie Wheeler version and played it, and that's why we probably spent like 2 or 3 hours one evening trying to recreate, trying to be like Sly and Robbie, and it's like we're not that good, we're just not that good.
Well, this is the original here. Look, I'll just play you the bit of the original. I mean, you couldn't really be accused of just copying it, in fairness.
No.
The
other thing that amused me about it was once we actually, worked it out, we sort of stood around for a good 5 minutes going, there's only 2 chords in it? That can't be fucking right. I mean, it sounds great. I can only do 2 chords in it.
Three, Jake. There's a bit in the middle where I think it changes, but next time we do rehearsals, you get it right then.
We put that 3rd chord in because you're a punk rock band. You got to have 3 chords. Bunnies doesn't have the 3rd chord.
So, I mean, Ali, from a bass player's point of view, must have been kind of nice to approach a track like this and to think, okay, you've got so much of reggae that is in the bass. I mean, was it something that really crossed your mind there, approaching this one?
I don't really know. I remember whenever just working back to another reggae cover, which was the iconic Johnny Was. I actually hadn't heard the song before we started playing it, and the bass line that I came up with, as I remember, kind of featured. It kind of copied the. I think there was a violin. There was a string part in that, Jake. If I get that right.
It could be. It could be.
And just naturally, instinctively played that even without hearing it. So it's just whatever I would have played just to suit the song. I didn't really think of myself as a bass player. That's for proper musicians to figure out. It's just like strap the thing on and play whatever feels right. Nothing was ever thought out. It was very instinctive.
Well, that's good. I think that's important to have that to kind of to feel it. I think that's something that's maybe missing.
Part of it was instinctive, and part of it was just to try and play louder than anybody else, so you could actually get noticed in this in rehearsals. Anyway, one of the things that we learnt as we went along from the earlier days was to create space and to listen to what was actually going on, and instead of it sounds like a cliche, but very often it's not what you play, it's what you don't play. And I think, Jake, you made me aware of this as a bit, because once you told me once that I played bass like a dentist, and I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "If you see a hole, you'll fill it." So okay. Sage advice.
Always being subtle. Mate.
But I actually did remember that and didn't tell you to fuck off like most of the other suggestions. And Go For It was one of the records where we actually sort of thought a bit more about what we're actually doing.
Yeah.
I mean, that guitar part in Roots Radix, what's that? I mean, that was yours, Jake, was it? As you
No, that's actually the horn part. That is the horn part of the original.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, we had to have something similar to the original.
So you can call it a cover, you know.
We can only afford the horn section for one song. You could play that.
Well, I'm actually going to play Fade Away now. We could just Fade Away. Here we go. Well, that was the first single released from Go For It. Was that your first choice for the single?
No, not from my point of view. I thought we should have gone with Silver Lining, but as I said earlier, you know, that had the brass section on, and there was this sort of, you can't have a brass section on a punk rock record. So I think, you know, to my way of thinking, Fade Away should have been the second single, and Silver Lining should have been the lead single. The record company did it the other way around. And you know, I think we lost a little bit of impetus because, you know, like I think a couple of months later, the Jam came out with a Town Called Malice and was like, "See, bloody told you." I heard a story. Mainly, I think it was Jim told me this, that Weller was staying around at his place and heard Silver Lining and was like, "He used a brass section," so we might be indirectly responsible for that because of that. But yeah, I mean, I still really like Fade Away as a song. It's still my favourite song to play, just because the guitar part's a bunch of fun. And I mean, again, writing music for it, I wanted to write a big jangly pop song. I wanted it to sound like Last Train to Clarksville, or in fact, actually, one of your brother's songs, "You Belong to Me," off This Year's Model.
This Year's Model.
So basically. It was basically that was the initial idea for the guitar thing at the start, was something that sounded along those lines. And again, as is always the way with us, you know, sort of we'll write these sort of either pretty melodies or whatever, and then Gordon and I sat down to do the lyrics, and he's like, "Well, what do you want it to be about?" And he reminded me of a story I'd told him about a girlfriend, a particularly persistent girlfriend, who wouldn't go away when it was obvious that our relationship was finished, and I kept trying to let her down gently, and she just wasn't for taking a fucking hint. So it's like, unfortunately, the actual lyric is quite nasty. You know? It's not supposed to be. I'm trying to do the right thing here, and you're not letting me.
So the instrumental track "Go For It," which we heard at the very start, has been your. I mean, I played that at the start. Obviously, it's been your intro music for live shows for many years. So did it ever have lyrics, was Ian Montague's question.
It did, yes.
Gordon wrote lyrics, yeah.
Yeah, but I can't remember the exact reason that we decided. There was, during the process, it was either the words didn't quite fit, or as we went along, we realized, oh, this is quite good, it's a departure. Let's just leave it like that and do endless overdubs and have a bit of fun. Do you remember the actual process?
Basically, yeah, because the whole thing, that whole song came together in the studio. You know, we'd got, I think, I don't know how many tracks are on the album, but if it's 12, we had 11 in the studio, and we desperately needed a final song. And as was our wont of an evening, we get to around 7 o'clock and everybody bugger off to the pub for an hour or two. And basically Henry stopped me going this one night, said, "Look, we've got to write another song." And so everybody else went to the pub, and he and I basically wrote just the little guitar thing. And it's like, okay, well, that might be something. And the guys came back. And I mean, that song's very much Jim's, because he came back and he started playing that drum pattern. as opposed to just 1, 2, 3 along with it. And so that gave it a life of its own, and again took it away from what would have just been a standard Ramalama punk rock song. It became this sort of weird, almost
like a shuffle beat
to the islands. Yeah, it is, and then we started putting, as Ali said, more and more overdubs, particularly percussion overdubs on it, which again, as I recall, as the night went on and we got drunker. I remember Jim being out in the studio getting really particularly very drunk, and he was trying to put it was either a shaker or a cabasa or something on it, and he kept just missing the beat every time. So it was like we're all standing in the studio going, then. And while we're doing all this, and we were having the time of our lives. You get to play with a recording studio. It's fun. Gordon was in the back frantically scribbling away, and we finished about 2:30 in the morning. And it was what you just played was what we'd ended up with, and it was being played across. And Gordon sort of shoved this piece of paper in my hand and went, "These are the words." And I just looked at him and pointed at the speakers and went, "I can't sing over that fucking racket." So that was pretty much why it didn't have the words.
Amazing.
It's true. What you were saying about it was the only song that was actually worked out in the studio, because we would everything was always worked out in the rehearsal studio, because whenever you get into the recording studio, that's much more expensive. That was the other pressure that we found ourselves under, because obviously you go into a good studio. It was like Jam or Wessex. Where was Wessex studio? It wasn't. We didn't do anything.
North London, isn't it? It's near Highbury, up that neck of the woods.
What did we do? What did we play? What did we record there?
We did listen there.
Anyway, so all this was Jam, but whenever you're playing, you're paying by the hour. This is the reality of what you're dealing with.
So missing cabasa beats can be an expensive business.
Yeah. We were drunk, who cares?
So Henry wrote 3 songs on the album, the only one, Kicking Up a Racket and Gate 49, and co-wrote Go For It with Jake. Were you bouncing these songs, ideas off each other, and bringing to the band mostly finished? What was happening? How was that happening?
Yeah, I mean, this was a huge burst of creativity from Mr. Clooney. I mean, I said earlier that we worked on the arrangements and stuff in a rehearsal studio, and also that this felt really strong as a band record, and I think that's reflected in the amount of things that Henry brought to the table on this album. I mean, if you look back on the first 2 albums. I think on the first album he wrote 2 songs, one of which was, I think, 56 seconds long, and the other was 2 minutes, just over 2 minutes. So basically, he gave us 3 minutes for the first album, and on the second album it was even less than that. It was 1 song of 1 minute 56. So to suddenly have, I've got 3 songs, it was like, fuck, brilliant, well done.
Concept album.
And again, because nobody had like little home studios like everybody has these days. So it was very much, okay, we're in a rehearsal room, and Henry had the guitar, and he would play. I mean, of the 3 he wrote, the one that I remember he changed the most was Gate 49. Because again, he played it as a straight ahead punk rock song. And, sort of, we wanted to, I was trying to get the band to stretch themselves and to stretch myself. So it was like, well, we've already got, we've got Roots, we've got a couple of other things that come down that road. Is there anything else we can do with that? And at the time, the Stray Cats had just arrived in London from America, and were kind of setting the West End on fire. And I remember Jim and I were particularly keen on them when we'd seen them a bunch of times at the Marquee. And so it was a case of, why don't we do it like the Stray Cats? And actually, we were talking earlier about everybody living in London. Henry actually had moved back to Belfast, so he kind of looked at us and went, Stray Cats? Well, he'd only heard 1 song on the radio. And so, then Jim came up with the sort of playing on the rims, sort of rockabilly kind of style. And, initially we weren't sure if it was going to work, because, it's a very thin line between it sounding like a rockabilly song and it sounded like a bad pub country act. And we definitely veered between the two in a rehearsal. But I think it came off really well. It also really suited Henry's voice when he was singing on it. And I'll give away a trade secret here. The lovely harmony singing right on the last verse is not actually any of us, because it was down to me to do the harmony singing, and in those days I could not sing harmony to save my life. I didn't know how to do it, and it's very much a natural thing. And we're an engineer, a guy who rejoiced in the magnificent name of David Hamilton Smith. And,
I remember
and he
him.
was just sat. Yeah, he was just sat at the control board singing the fucking harmony perfectly, and he kept turning to me and going, "Look, it's really simple. It goes like this." To the point that eventually I went, "Well, you fucking sing it then." So he did. So it's actually him singing the harmony.
I remember David Hamilton Smith. He was the guy who I had a fight with because he accused me of eating his cheesecake out of the fridge at that time. And I had no idea that he did the harmonies, but if he had, I didn't give a shit because it was really nice cheesecake. And even though I denied it at the time. But
so Revelations, Ali Mordi, he did indeed steal that cheesecake.
Nicky cheesecake.
Yes.
Yeah,
well,
he was a bit of an ass anyway.
Yes, double barrel name, but anyway. But whenever you're working late in the studio and you get out and everything's shut, pubs, restaurants, bars, cafes, and sometimes raiding the studio fridge is your last recall.
Yeah, quite right too.
And talking about singing, there's a question from Renan Alavas, or I'll try to some of these names. I know Renan Alavas. Jake, we can hear that on this album. You slightly changed the way you sing for better, in my opinion, reaching different notes and giving a much more melodic tunes to the songs. What was the reason for that? Was it a change to maybe drive the SLF sound into a new era, the 80s? I'm assuming by different notes, they don't mean ones other than the ones you meant to sing.
All the right notes.
Tread carefully here, Ronan.
Actually, it's interesting. Yeah, I mean, there was a definite move away, a deliberate move away from the barking dog style of singing on the first couple of records. But it's interesting you said, you hit certain notes, because the hardest song on the record to sing is Safest Houses, which sadly was also my favourite song to sing, but it was a bastard to get up to the high notes, because I wrote it in the wrong key.
Again.
So yeah, it's not the first time, and sadly not the last either. You think I'd have fucking learned. But,
we'll have to invent a key.
We'd already recorded the backing track, and obviously it's in the wrong bloody key. So when I came to do the lyric, they slowed the tape machine down so I could hit the notes. Then, of course, we had to check it back at the right speed to make sure that it didn't sound like Mickey or Minnie Mouse, whatever. And actually, it wasn't too bad, because we only had to go down a tone. So it wasn't too awful. So, of course, the way we recorded them was like sort of do a couple of lines, see what they sound like. So we were speeding it back up, slowing it down, speeding it back up, slowing it down. And we were getting through the song, and we got to the middle 8 section, and they just played it through the headphones, and I sang it and got it first take, which didn't happen that often, but I got it in the first take, and there was silence and concerned looks being exchanged through the control room glass. I'm like, oh fuck, it's miles off, innit? And they went, you nailed that, that's spot on. I went, oh great, why do you look so worried? They said, because we didn't slow the tape down, and that's actually higher than all the bits you were missing. And God knows how. But I said, well, great. Well, we'll go for the last verse, back in the original key. Nah, not a cat's chance. Slow it back down again.
And Richard Squibbs asks, what did you make of Doug Bennett as a producer? Used him more than once, so obviously he worked. Any significant differences in studio approach between the Nobody's Heroes and Go For It sessions? Did his work with Hawkwind have anything to do with you using him for your records?
I didn't know he worked with Hawkwind. I wouldn't have worked with a bugger.
Take off, get away.
No, basically we used Doug because the Alternative Ulster single came about as it was originally recorded. The recording that was released was made as a demo for Island Records, and we were given the master tapes when Island were closing our Hammersmith studio. And we obviously didn't have the money to go in and re-record the record back then. We didn't have a record deal going. This is going all the way back now. But Rough Trade were willing to spring for somebody to remix it, remix 2 tracks, and they remixed 78 and Alternative Ulster, and Doug Bennett did the remix. And we heard obviously we'd had heard the original demos and then heard what he'd done to it, and the difference was like night and day. So when it came to making the album with Chrysalis, the Nobody's Heroes record, then suddenly we had a budget and we could, it really was, who do you want to produce this? And it's like, once you've all stopped laughing at the idea of getting Phil Spector in or whatever, we then sort of started looking at who we did want to get in. And, the usual names were thrown about. Nick Lowe seemed to come up every 5 minutes, which is why there's a joke on that album sleeve that says this album was not produced by Nick Lowe. Just because his name was thrown for everything, at that point. And he's a very fine producer. Anyway. We found we just hit it off really well with Doug. And again, to go back to what Ali was saying earlier about, a thing has to work as a unit. And we found that he was on the same wavelength in terms of a sense of humor, but equally he'd get the work done. While he was also happy to, unlike a lot of producers who sort of clock watch a lot of the time, he was equally happy to sort of, oh fuck it, yeah, let's go down to the pub, stop working.
And he also got all the drinks in. He was very good for springing for the round. Yes, that's all. Top geezer.
That's all it takes to be a Stiff Little Fingers producer. But you had it in your pocket to get to the pub,
Roll up.
No, but I mean, he did very much. He got the vibe of the thing, and he was very much a joiner-inner, and he was willing to go the extra mile. You come up with a stupid idea, and instead of reject it out of hand, it was very much let's give it a go. I mean, the broken bottles on Nobody's Heroes was a ridiculous idea, but we did it. We needed I'm talking about the wrong album, but on the song Nobody's Hero, the middle 8 section was very much the obvious chord sequence to go to. I mean, I was guilty of writing like that a lot back then. And we needed something to lift it out of the ordinary. And Doug basically spent hours on his own working out this ridiculous effect, whereby he had to take the entire 24-track tape, reverse it, play that back, record that onto a quarter-inch thing, and then it had this weird sort of whoosh coming in noise. He then had to time that and put it back onto the 24-track going the right way. And he did all that in his own time, and it might have not worked. But, because he was invested in it as a project, and he was willing to take the time and do it.
It sort of felt like we spoke earlier on about how you were splitting the money, including Gordon, in all of that, and you working as a team. It must have been very important for anybody joining that team to really kind of join in and be in it artistically as much as and creatively as much as anything else.
Yeah, and again, we were actually open to suggestion. I mean, we had very set ideas of what we wanted it to sound like. But equally, if somebody came up with an idea, the attitude was very much, let's give it a go, see what it sounds like. And if it was obvious within 2 minutes it wasn't going to work, then we'd bin it and move on. But equally, if there was value in it, like the idea, the thing I just talked about with Doug, he would literally stay there all night to get it right.
Yeah. Well, we're going to move on now to Silver Lining, which you touched on the brass section and the sort of the move into a different. We'll hear it first. Here we go. So how come you wrote a song? How did a song about socialism with a horn section end up on a punk album? And could you imagine that this would become one of your "Can't Drop It From the Set List" songs 20 years later?
Yeah, well, again, I think this was one that Gordon had written the words first, and I didn't. I put the tune to it. When I was a kid, most of the records I bought were on the Motown label. I always loved that sort of sound. I mean, but we didn't have that, as you can tell, we didn't have that lightness of touch at all. So we had basically had a sort of a Motown song as played by Slade or something. So that's pretty much what we ended up with. And yeah, I mean, I came up with the song, the music behind it, and I remember Gordon getting particularly excited about that one because it was the first obvious departure. Just the two of us sitting in the apartment with just an acoustic guitar. It was obvious what it was going to sound like. I mean, I didn't play it, or we didn't as a band play it as a straight sort of soul style song. In fact, if anything, the actual structure of it bears more to Thin Lizzy's Boys Are Back in Town, because every chord is pushed. So it had that to it. And again, to go back to what Ali said earlier, that was completely unconscious. That was obviously our sort of inherent love of Thin Lizzy coming out quiet in the background. I mean, by that stage, the Q-Tips had signed to Chrysalis Records, so we used to hang out with those guys. We'd see them around the offices and stuff, and they were a phenomenal band. Great horn sections. Where obviously Paul Young eventually came out of. He was the singer of that band. But they had a great horn section, and they were again, importantly, they were fantastic guys. So dead easy to work with, and it was the first time we'd ever used an outside musician on the records. And they came in, and I remember being terrified because it was only when they all walked through the door, and it's not these three guys that I knew from going to see the band or hanging out with at the record company offices or whatever. Suddenly these are three musicians who all look at me and go, "What do you want us to play?" And I don't write music, and I'm like, "Fuck, I don't know." I knew the tune, and I thought, I'm too actually embarrassed to sit here in a control room and go, "I want you to play da 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 da." So I tried playing it on the guitar and realized, they're all starting watching me, and I'm thinking, I really should have worked this out before they came in. I knew what I was doing. But luckily, they were very patient, and they started. Suddenly, they're pros. They reach into their cases, and suddenly the paper with the lines on comes out, and they're like, right, so you do this, you do that. And, I give them like one bit of direction, and they went into the studio and nailed it. They were even doing the spinning on the spot stuff. It was brilliant in the studio. Fantastic.
You can hear the spinning on the record. You can hear that.
You can if you listen closely.
Yeah,
so
not to the extent where we thought we should be doing that, but didn't the section play at least one live gig with us?
Yes, they did.
I recall.
I'm amazed they spoke to us after it. Yes, they did. They turned up. Yeah, because again, the thing about the Q-Tips was that they all had these matching suits.
Oh, I remember the suits.
So the bass player and the drummer, I think, had red suits. The keyboard player and guitar player had yellow suits. Paul, I think, up front had a green suit. The brass section all had these matching powder blue suits. And yeah, like Ali said, we asked them if they'd want to come along and play. I think the show was at the Rainbow in London. We asked them if they wanted to come along and play, and they were like, yeah, we'd love it. That'd be loads of fun. So it's only again on the afternoon of the show, they were coming for sound check. And I remember thinking, shit, I hope they don't wear the fucking suits. Because our audience is not going to take well to three geezers in matching powder blue suits. And they turned up for the sound check, and they were wearing jeans and sweatshirts and stuff. And I'm like, up for that. That's okay. That's great. And they did the sound check, and it sounded fantastic. And so we're doing the show that night, and we get to the point in the set where we're about to play Silver Lining. And I'm like, ladies and gentlemen, this is our latest single, and features a brass section. Would you please welcome on stage the brass section for the Q-Tips? Oh, fuck, they're wearing the suits. There was just a hail of gob flew at them. I mean, it's like they were blowing bubbles out the end of the saxophone and stuff. It was terrible. And yeah, I mean, I don't think they've spoken to me from that day to this.
That was the last time they played with you.
Yeah, it was for one night only.
So Ali, you've mentioned to me before the other day we were chatting away about this that there was a track that kind of inspired or made you at least think that that brass section on a punk song wasn't such a weird idea?
Well, I think I mentioned the fact that 3 years before that, in the heady days of 1978, there was an Australian punk band called The Saints, and their single "Know Your Product" featured a brass section, and it was stunning. It just gelled perfectly, and I was amazed to think that this could work. But secretly, I think I'd always been a fan of brass sections ever since my first single that I ever bought, which was by Wizard, and it was Ballpark Incident. And Wizard, of course, featured brass all over the place. You know, there's about 27 in the band, and so on. And at the height of glam rock, that was great. And I thought they were somehow subversive, probably just because they had long hair at the time and dressed funny. But I've always had a soft spot for brass players, because that is something that I know I will never be able to do. And the Saints Know Your Product is a perfect example of something that two genres that can not necessarily obviously work, but came together fantastically in that song.
And it brings us nicely to
get away with it.
It brings us nicely to Pete McCamley's question, and how with how good Silver Lining turned out with the brass on it. Did it ever cross your mind to make a full album with the brass section on it, or now do an acoustic tour with a string section, or would that not fit with the SLF way?
String section, fuck it up.
The Royal Philharmonic.
Anything's possible these days. That's all I can say. And
didn't Peter Gabriel do a whole tour with the full orchestra and everything?
Ronan, that's Peter Gabriel.
He's got money. Plus, have you seen how much brass sections drink? I thought we were bad.
And obviously,
them in beer alone.
And obviously, you need to find a new one. I mean, obviously, you can't use the old one. So
I can't use the Q-tips.
So did it ever cross your mind to do a full album of with more?
Not really. I mean, I think it's down to whatever songs suit the instruments. I mean, as time went on, like I said, that was the first time we used an outside musicians, and we brought them in on other records. I mean, some that Ali wasn't involved in. On the Tinderbox record, we had we had a fiddle player on. We had a fiddle player, a ballroom player. We've had keyboard players come in, tin whistle players. Also, it's also. So I think that that's the other reason I think that I look back on Go For It so fondly is it broadened our outlook. I mean, up to then we were very much a four-piece rock band, and then we realised what was possible, what was feasible, and that we could actually. You didn't have to limit yourselves to just that. Albeit I still think that's where we operate best. But every so often you hear something in the back of your mind. There's a little voice going, that would sound great with a Hammond organ on it or something. So it freed us up a lot. The Go For It record, I think.
Well, are there any songs this is Trevor O'Connell's question. Did any songs not make the final cut that eventually turned up elsewhere?
Well, no, like we said earlier, we were forced to write
we're desperately trying to find as many songs.
Go For It came out of you needing another song. So there was no.
I'm going to pub. No, you're not.
There was nothing on the cutting room floor anyway.
Nope. And ironically, that became the title, the album, the title of the album, the last desperate song.
And Ian Nags asks, Jake and Ali, what's your favourite song off the album, and which gig from the tour did you enjoy the most? So we'll go Jake first.
Initially, I would have said Fade Away, just because it's so much fun from a guitar player's point of view to play. But I think now that we've worked out how to play it in the right key, Safe as Houses is probably my favourite song on the record. And with regards to that tour, the tour was fantastic. I mean, I remember the tour being, we decided that it's fantastic up to a point. We decided to take a production out with us. They were very much the thing at the time, like a stage set. And obviously the album cover is a kid climbing a skyscraper. we went to see these guys, and it was like, you know, the Spinal Tap Stonehenge thing. We go into this art director's room, and he's got all these little models made, and he built this fucking skyscraper, and they'd worked out how to have, through a set of the glow lights, they were going to have like a kid climbing up this thing as the gig went on. And I was like, this looks fucking great. I was like, it's going to cost a fortune. I went, no, that's the beauty of it. It's basically just scaffolding with a load of canvas stretched over it. I went, well, isn't it going to take up like a huge amount of the stage? I said, again, the joy of this is we cut out what would be the entrance to the building, and we put the drums in there. Now, on paper, this looks and sounds fantastic, and as a little model, it looked great. In reality, this thing was huge, and it looked like nothing so much as a bloody great chimney or a wigwam once it was put together. And so it looked like Jim was playing in a fireplace rather than supposed to be the entrance to a big and impressive office building. We also found that out of a 30 or 31 date tour, there were only 3 venues that had a clearance big enough we could get this fucking thing into. So we basically sat on an Edwin Shirley truck outside the venue, and we spent a fortune on this bloody thing, and we got it in 3 places.
Oh no!
So I think because of that, I fondly remember Newcastle City Hall, because it was like, walked into sound check and it was there. It was like fuck, we got a venue, we put the bloody thing in.
No one thought to check ceiling heights.
No, not at all.
I mean, Ronan, you're asking about
favorite songs, Ali. Yeah, go on.
Well, our favorite. Well, favorite songs is difficult. I mean, a favorite one actually wasn't our song. It was Roots Radix, simply because it was such a departure. It was so different from the original. But hits and misses. Personally, lyrically, for me, was one of the favourites on the album. Then again, Piccadilly Circus. There are so many. It really depends on the time and the place. But I looked back. I was on a different tack. I was the documentarist of the band. I was the only one who kept a journal, who kept a sort of a diary, day-to-day stuff. A lot of the stuff was boring, but I think if it hadn't been for that, we wouldn't have been able to put together tour programs with actual accurate dates in there, because nobody else bothered keeping track of the places that we played.
Yeah, it's done.
And Jake mentioned that there were only a few places that we could have got this massive stage set in. So I looked up my 1981. I don't know if you see this. Is my 1981 journal diary.
Wow.
Very small because I was too busy doing lots of other busy stuff instead of actually writing things. But I actually do have the dates. Is that apparent? Written down.
Yeah.
There.
Wow.
That we did, and they stretched from Belfast on the 21st of April at the Ulster Hall, obviously. Through to all these dates, which went through for a month towards the end of May, and then we started in America, and then I think Sweden and many other places. France towards the end, and it looks like a lot, but it actually was.
Are they like consecutive nights? I mean, how many nights in a row would you do?
Most of them were in the early days.
To go for a tour, I think we only had like 2 days off for the whole tour, like over a month, 2 or 3 days. On 2 of those were travel days.
I look at the schedules that we used to have, and invariably, there'd be set out supporting whatever album that we brought out, and it'd be literally 32, 33 gigs in 34, 35 days.
That's crazy.
And I don't know how we did it, but we certainly did, and it's stood us in good stead.
What sort of length sets were you doing at this stage?
What sort of sets?
What sort of length were the sets you were doing? Were they? Because your third album by this point.
Ronan, timing is an abstract concept. I have no idea. We went on at the start and we finished at the finish at the end, and that was it.
Because you had like three albums by this point. Was it hard to Did you find it odd fitting the new songs in with the first songs in the first album? Was that kind of an odd thing?
all the new songs that we put in, everybody's like, oh, they've sold out. It's all pop, rubbish. We want the old stuff. And now, I don't know how many decades on, those very same songs have become the old songs, and it's and time immemorial may it continue. We didn't find it difficult to put the songs in. I mean, it was we enjoyed playing them, and I think I would like to think our enthusiasm for that and or possible pig-headedness just paid off over the years, and people accepted that. Some songs worked and some didn't. The ones that worked stood the test of time, and the ones that didn't.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. And again, that we did with both, obviously with an Unflammable Material, because it was, our first album, and we hadn't, we weren't writing for an album, we were just writing songs. But all those things we played live, and to again also with Nobody's Heroes, because we recorded Nobody's Heroes in 2 shifts. There's like one we did like a couple of weeks before Christmas, and then we had Christmas, New Year, and we did the rest of it, I think, in February. So those songs all had a chance to live on the road before we recorded them. I don't think that was the case with Go For It. I think, like I said, we spent a lot of time in the rehearsal room, because not only because, as Ali said, it was cheaper than a fucking recording studio, but also because it was, we hadn't played them live, so it was a case of, we were feeling the songs out there and then. And with regards to putting them in the set, again, as he just said, you put them in, and if people don't like them, they don't like them, and then it's a case of sit in the dressing room and go, well, do we dump it and put Tin Soldiers back in, or do we stick with it? And 9 times out of 10, as Ali said, we were bloody minded. It was like, no, fuck it, it's a good song, keep it in. So.
I think you kind of have to when you're going out with the new album. You've got to tour the new album, and you've got to give those songs a chance, and not just fall back on the ones that will definitely work. And I think, well, these ones need to get bedded in the set. Yeah, right. Absolutely. We have Grant asks, Jake, why did you wear a dinner suit and bow tie on the Top of the Pops performance of Just Fade Away?
just for the hell of it. I mean, it really was a kid. Again, sort of, at that stage, punk bands were starting to be more about, how tall is the spike in your hair and how many studs do you have on your leather jacket. And I thought, well, what's the opposite of that? What's actually, what's going to be the most punk rock thing I can do? I thought, wear a tuxedo. So, so I did. And it was actually Gordon's tuxedo, which I think his mum bought him when he was at university, because she thought he was going to be attending lots of debutantes balls or whatever. And of course, he ended up managing a punk rock band. So, so he loaned me it, and as luck would have it, it fitted. And then of course I wore it on Top of the Pops. It got completely covered and smudged in makeup and was ruined from that point on. So apologies, Gordon. I probably owe you a tuxedo. Not that you want it these days. But.
And what other did you do a lot of kind of TV shows around that time? And were there slots like on shows that you did to promote the singles?
We'd find ourselves on odd places, like Dutch television or Swedish TV. I don't think they really knew much what to make of us, but actually more than I think than the British TV, obviously, apart from Top of the Pops. But I don't really seem to remember the media as being particularly supportive at the time.
No, I think again, a lot of that came about from, we were pigeonholed basically at that point. We were, they're a punk rock band, they're the UK subs, they're whatever, and I mean, no disrespect to the UK subs, it was just, but that's how we were seen, and it didn't really matter that we had tried to move and shift the dynamic of the music. We made 2 albums, and as far as the media were concerned, that's what we did. It's an interesting dichotomy looking back on it, that if Go For It had been released under a different band's name, whether it would have done better or garnered more interest. I don't know.
But it also has to be said, oddly or possibly stupidly, we never really amongst ourselves garnered the power of the media or of TV, and we would rarely have cancelled a live gig just to do a TV show. I remember,
yeah, true.
And I seem to remember at Top of the Pops being turned down because we were in Liverpool or at one point. or
I
something
can't
like
remember,
that.
Hull, I think.
Or
Hull.
Hull.
But either
Hull?
way, yes. I mean, it was. Yeah, I think so.
No disrespect to Hull. Hull's a great place.
But I mean, and I think that the other thing as well was, because we had been pigeonholed and kind of, we felt like, well, I felt like we were tolerated rather than, thanks for doing this or whatever.
Yeah.
As a consequence of which, we didn't treat the shows with a lot of fucking respect either. Hence the tuxedo, and at one point I think Jim went on top of the pops and played the drums with a fake haddock and stuff. Played a ball run for no apparent reason. Yeah, so we didn't, as a consequence, there was a mutual loathing, I think, basically.
We got some good. I was sending some of these photos we got sent through from people. So there's.
Don't remember that one.
So I'm trying to see if I can get through these. See if I can flick through them, but I don't seem to be able to.
Is it a Silver Clyde or a Silver Ghost? Oh, I'm not supposed to know that.
No idea, mate.
I'm going to try and get through these other photos here, because there's a few. This is a good one here. Look, I'll play this one. I'll show this one. This is a ticket. There we go.
There you go.
So, would you tour this album again? Is a question that someone sent in through here, and would the tickets be £3.50? If you do,
wouldn't it be lovely if they could?
If you can move the decimal point 1 point over there,
sadly, that's the way of the world, isn't it?
But I think it was Peter Brandt asked, would you consider touring the album again?
Well, the sad thing is, obviously, we've missed this particular, landmark because of the whole coronavirus thing. But I actually, again, I know I keep saying it's my favorite of the first bunch of records. Looking back on it, I don't really think there's a weak tune on it. So it would be one of the ones I'd actually be reasonably comfortable about touring. The only sort of caveat I'd put on that is that, as we mentioned earlier, it was very much a band record, and it was very much everybody brought things to the table. And like I said, unprecedentedly, Henry brought 3 songs, and of course Henry's not with us, so it's awkward trying to, we don't play any of the songs now that Henry wrote when he was with us, just for the simple reason that I didn't sing them, and so I'm not going to try and sing them now. So that would prove a problem, but there's no reason why I guess we couldn't have a little, in the middle of a show, like the tribute to go for it and play like 5 songs from it or something. There's no reason we couldn't do something like that.
And Leslie Bourman asks, "What's your favourite track from Go For It to play live?" And I think you said
Fade Away for me, yeah.
Yeah, he said Save Us Houses was your. Oh no, Fade Away.
Yeah.
Now Save Us Houses.
Save Us Houses is my favourite song.
Oh, okay, brilliant. To play live and
Fade Away's got too many notes in it. Yeah.
What's your favourite one to play live, Ali, from the record?
I think I mentioned earlier on it would be Hits and Misses.
Hits and Misses, yeah.
Simply because it's good to see Jake to step up to the mark and see if he can actually sing it in key. And,
don't get ahead of yourself here. Don't get ahead.
So this is I'll just share this T-shirt here. Look, I pulled this one off the Facebook page. It's a new.
Yeah, that's the newer one. I was looking at it going, that's an interesting colour scheme. It was only when I actually looked at it really closely I realised, it's actually the album cover behind all the lettering, isn't it? Took me a bit of figuring out.
Ah, yeah, I did. Ah, it is.
Say, wasn't just me.
It wasn't just you. It just I thought it was just that's brilliant. So so these are the new T-shirts.
Yeah, that's the celebratory, as you said, shirt, because we can't get out and play it, but you can wear it.
Absolutely, you can't hear it, but you can wear it. So so you can pick them up at the website. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, everybody wants to do that.
SLF.rocks.
SLF.rocks, brilliant. Okay, well, thanks so much for for joining. Thanks for inviting me
absolutely.
and Switchbox TV to be a part of this. It's been a real pleasure for us, and I hope everybody who's watching has enjoyed it. And we hope that we can get you back on the stage and hearing your tribute to Go For It live. Maybe when you get the Royal Philharmonic in and it all just breaks down, yeah. And you get the massive...
And somebody else's brass section.
Well, it's brilliant. Listen, Jake and Ali, thank you so much. And if you guys... so just stay well and stay safe. And is there anything else you want to... sort of looking back on the album as it was then, what's your sort of abiding memory of it, of that time? Just sort of sum it up.
Just the actual creativity around the band and within the band at the time, the certainty in what we were doing. I mean, it's always been a lot of fun playing with these guys, and they are my friends first and foremost. But then it really felt like a solid unit. It felt, we really did feel like a gang that were, inseparable, and everybody did their part, and it worked really well.
Yeah, and from my point of view, I remember taking the first mixes that we had from Olympic Studios in Barnes. I had a cassette of it, and I was lucky enough to find myself sitting in the back of Phil Lynott's limo, which actually was just a Volvo. Next to him, stick it on the stereo.
You ruined it.
And he was very impressed. And he's the sort of guy that he would have said, if this is shite, he thought it was shite. He would have said, "Are you sure about this, Ali?" But he said, "This is fucking stunning." And that's all I can say.
Well, that's good.
That's why we went,
That's
wow,
praise indeed
Phil
to
likes
take
it,
that.
We've made it.
Absolutely. Well, listen, thanks, guys, and wish you all the best. And yes, as I say, stay safe and well. Thanks for joining us here on Switchbox TV, and thank you to everybody who's subscribed. And you can subscribe if you want to hear. There's 2 more interviews to look back on with the wonderful Jake Burns, and there's plenty of other interviews and stuff going on there as well. And make sure that you go out and buy this album again, because we can't. Everybody has to go out and buy it again. And yes, so this is it. I think just thanks very much, guys, for joining us.
Thank you.
We'll hope to see you back on the stage very soon. Until then, take care.
Me too. Yeah,
Cheers, mate.
thanks,
Cheers,
Roland.
guys.